At this hour, there are hundreds of thousands of people here in Tiananmen Square.
Scattered protests continue to sputter, and there are new reports of skirmishes and violence in the wake of this weekend's massive military assault aimed at smashing China's pro-democracy demonstration.
Beijing's Bloody Sunday is history now, but there are visible ended at Tiananmen Square in the heart of Beijing, where soldiers fired automatic weapons into crowds of civilians, and the casualties were staggering.
但是他说是爱国呀。
以前的人给反对他们就是不同的意见，当时当时是不强求，
他不强求。
In May of 1989, thousands of young college students crowded into central Beijing protesting for a more democratic government and economic reforms. For more than 3 weeks, the protesters marched and chanted as reporters from all over the world documented much of the show for people to watch and read in the US and Europe. On June 4th, the Chinese Communist leaders decided to force the protesters out of Tiananmen Square. The government stated the main reason the protests were shut down was because the protests brought down the government during a visit from the Soviet premier. Chinese armed forces raged into Tiananmen Square by the call of Li Peng. Li Peng, the highest-ranking advocate, was born on October 20th, 1928 at Chengdu, Sichuan, China. He is the son of the writer Shuo Shan, who was executed by the Nationalist Party. During the massacre, Li Peng advocated for the removal of students by force. He sent the armed forces into central Beijing to put an end to the protests. Deng Xiaoping was the leader of the Chinese Communist Party from 1970 until his retirement in 1989, the year of the massacre. He was born on August 22, 1904, in Zhuan, China, where he joined the Communist Party during the high school and rose through the political ranks until he became the leader of the Communist Party. Many Chinese Communist Party leaders were in favor of removing the protesters by force. Xiaoping was one of them. Because of this, he faced major worldwide criticism. Amnesty International stated about 180 to 2,600 civilians died in the massacre, including soldiers and college students. However, the Chinese government said about 200 civilians were killed, including 36 college students and 16 soldiers. The Chinese government was criticized for their actions, but nothing else was done. The aftermath of the massacre resulted in the arrest and expulsion of many foreign journalists. The government strictly covered the events in the press. At least 10,000 were arrested. For the massacre, bystanders cheered on enthusiastic demonstrators and gave support for the student hunger strike. Due to the massacre, many governments, such as the United States, suspended military sales and visits to the country. This did not bring closure, but it sent a strong message to China that such an irrational action would not go unpunished. There is no memorial or remembrance day for the Tiananmen massacre. The government makes sure that no one speaks of it, blocking information related to it, as well as textbooks, films, media, and newspapers. Victims of the massacre and mothers of the victims have tried to bring this event back into the spotlight by reaching out to the Chinese government. A soldier who was involved in the crackdown on the peaceful protesters in 1989 published a letter that was directed to President Hu Jintao, calling for the government to change its opinion on the protests. Shortly after, he was removed from his home. only further showing the lengths that the Chinese government is willing to go to suppress the incident. The Tiananmen Mothers is a non-profit organization that is bringing awareness to this atrocity. They are a group of Chinese democratic activists who are trying to promote a change in the Chinese government's position on the Tiananmen Square massacre. The Tiananmen Mothers say they want three things from the Chinese government: truth, accountability, and compensation. We ask you to support this cause for the mothers of the victims themselves, and the many killed still without a name. To support the victims of this atrocity, please sign the petition located at worldwideweb.fillthesquare.org.